Happy winter. Welcome to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. My name is Kaylee.
And my name is Desi.
Be sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell next to the subscribe button to turn on post notifications. Before we get into this case, we always encourage those who have useful information to any unsolved case, please report it to your local police and sheriff department.
Before we get into this case, please be advised, this video is not recommended for people under the age of 18 and will contain some very graphic details. If you do not feel comfortable listening, please click off now.
Today we will be discussing more killings done by the Zodiac Killer. In case you haven't watched it already, we posted Zodiac Killer Part One, which will be posted in the description below. I highly recommend y'all to watch it first before continuing on.
Previously, we had discussed that we had learned about some of his victims, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. It was near Christmas time and both of them died sadly after they were attacked by the Zodiac Killer. We also learned about Michael Mojo being shot in the jaw on 4th of July, and he survived somehow, but unfortunately his friend Darlene Farron was shot multiple times and did not survive. Both set of victims were shot in close proximity.
August 8th, 1969, Donald and Betty Harden of Salinas decoded a cryptogram, and there was a misspelled message which was referencing the most dangerous game. The author says that he was going to collect slaves in his afterlife. However, he went and said that he is not going to give his name away because if he gives his name away, then he feels like it would affect his ability to have slaves in his afterlife.
Man, this man fucking crazy, but whatever. The next set of victims were Bryan Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. Both were college students that attended Pacific Union. Bryan was 20 and Cecilia was 22, and of course, they were a couple. Like the first victims were, it seemed to be a pattern, the Zodiac Killer for couples, or people he thought were couples, which is weird. September 27th, 1969, they decided to go on a picnic, and the picnic was at the lake.
So the lake that they went to is called Lake Berryessa. This is near Napa, California. So if you don't know where Napa, California is about 1.5 hours away from Sacramento. However, it is also about 2 hours from the San Francisco Bay Area. Also, Lake Berryessa is a reservoir. And if you haven't been to a reservoir before, it's basically like a man-made lake. And there's a lot of different things you can do. You can go boating, you can go fishing, swimming. There's just so many different activities that you can do. And it was going to be a lot of fun for this couple. The reservoir also had this small little island. Basically, on this island, you could walk across it. And this island was across this place known as Twin Oak Ridge. And they went to this little island and decided to go and have a picnic together, kind of, cuddle and just enjoy each other, just like a normal couple would.
The suspect in question was described as tall, 5'11", white man, weighing 170 pounds. He was wearing a black hood with clip-on sunglasses, bib-like clothing that had a white 3x3 cross circle symbol. He had a 45mm gun, and claimed that he was a convict from Montana. He also had a two-word name, and police later on confirmed he was talking about a jail in Montana named Deer Lodge. He killed a guard and stole a car.
I think the reason why he released that information is because he wanted them to comply and be afraid of him. That he thought if he were to tell them that he had escaped from this prison or jail cell, that they would be too afraid to go to the police and report exactly what happened. I think that was why he released that detail. Like we said, this man came up to them, and then what he did is he asked the couple if he could borrow their car. He claimed that the stolen vehicle that he stole after he shot a guard after escaping from prison, he claimed that that vehicle was too hot. Claimed that he needed to use their vehicle to travel to Mexico because, like I said, the stolen car was too hot. So obviously Hartnell, just like any other person should do, he complied. He gave the killer the car keys and even his wallet. Because definitely in this type of situation, you want to make sure you're going to comply. This might be why he survived. Despite that, the Zodiac Killer decided to tie the couple up with the clothesline and proceeded to stab the couple multiple times. Hartnell was obviously attacked first, which is very interesting. However, after stabbing them for a while, this man decided to leave. Why do you think that the Zodiac Killer stabbed them even after Hartnell complied and gave him his car keys and wallet?
Probably because his objective in the first place wasn't to rob them, but essentially he wanted to see what he could get out of the couple and how far he could push it before he decided to do what he was really there to do, and that was to kill them, because obviously they were a couple. He was, strangely enough, against couples for some unknown vindictive reason. I guess.
Odd reason.
His original goal was to kill them anyway. He did it to kind of play a little game, have a little bit of fun for himself before he decided to stab.
And why do you think the Zodiac Killer decided to stab Hartnell first rather than the female?
Maybe because he had more of a hatred towards men than women. That could be a possibility why. Or maybe Hartnell was giving him more issues than Cecilia was.
And why do you think the killer was headed to Mexico?
Obviously, he's a wanted man, first of all. But probably to throw the trail off of him, and, once you cross country borders and all that stuff, it's a lot more to indict or go after somebody than if they were still in the country themselves. A lot of places do have extradition laws. People who are guilty of crime are untouchable in some countries, or, the countries won't go after them because they've committed crimes in a different country. That could have been one reason why. But nearby, a fisherman heard screams and alerted the park rangers. The couple had already untied themselves by the time help arrived. Both were in critical condition. It took an hour for the ambulance to arrive, and a little over an hour, Napa police received a call from somebody claiming responsibility of this attack, like multiple other instances before. Cecilia died 48 hours later, but Brian Shepherd made it out alive, just like Michael Mageau did. So, yeah, how did the couple get themselves untied by the time help had arrived?
So there is a possibility that Zodiac Killer could have accidentally left the knife that he had stabbed them with. And so obviously they could have used that knife to get themselves out of it. Also, there is some different ways you can look up online, like how to get yourself out of any sort of knot.
And why do you think that Cecilia died but Brian Shepherd made it? Was this intentional, or did it just happen that Cecilia had more pressing damage?
So I could definitely see how it could be intentional, because again, like, a lot of the females tended to die, but at the same time it could have just been like strictly coincidental, because again, like, we don't know if maybe she has some sort of underlying health condition that obviously being stabbed to begin with, it's already rough on yourself, but if you have some sort of underlying condition or some sort of like bleeding or clotting disorder, then it would have just made matters worse, and that's why she died, but he lived. So obviously there was a funeral held for Cecilia. There was many people who actually attended her funeral. Fortunately, Hartnell did recover from all of his stab wounds, and to this day, Hartnell is actually an attorney in Southern California. And the great thing about this whole situation is he turned a very negative situation into a more positive situation. Imagine just being like stabbed like that and trying to go and live your life normally. It's hard, but instead he took it as a way to be a part of justice system and become like an actual like attorney. He did do several interviews in the beginning with the media about the Zodiac attack. However, after several years, he decided to stop interviewing it's definitely hard to really be in a spotlight like that, and I'm sure it caused a lot of trauma to him. What's even crazier about this case too is at one point Ted Bundy was actually a suspect for this case.
I mean, Ted Bundy was a suspect for a lot of cases, to be fair.
Yeah, he's crazy too.
He was crazy and he was guilty of a lot of shit. I mean, he did a lot of things, and there's still, like, people out there that they think he killed that they can't prove it, of course. And he did, so there's no getting it out of him. But on the victim's car door, there was a message that was left behind, which was the dates of the previous victim, so Faraday Jensen, Farron Mageau, with a cross circle, which was the Zodiac's signature symbol. There was tire tracks behind the victim's car, which indicated that there was another car that was pulled up behind him, and a 10.5 wing walker shoe print was found at the scene. Police say that based off of this, he likely weighed 210 pounds, which is different from the description that was given of a tall 5'11" white man weighing 170. So my question to you about this is, why do you think he decided to leave a message with the dates of previous victims along with his famous signature symbol at this crime scene?
So I think the main reason why he decided to leave a message with the dates of the previous victims along with his famous signature symbol was to basically symbolize to the police that he's in charge and that he has power over the actual police. Because, like, even before with case after case so far, is that he tends to always leave a message about his previous victims, about, you know, claiming them. So that's just kind of basically like him putting, like, his statement out there. So roughly about 2 weeks later in San Francisco, the Zodiac Killer had a new prey. So this male white passenger decides to enter a cab. And this is at the intersection of Mason and Geary Street. The cab driver's name was Paul Stine. Basically, also where the intersection he was picked up at was approximately 1 block west of the Union Square. So anyways, he gets into this cab and he requests to Paul Stine to be driven to Washington and Maple Streets and Presidio Heights.
Stine drove 1 block away from the original destination, which was now at Washington and Cherry Street. Passengers shot him with 9mm, which was not the same as the Farron killing, but 3 teenagers had witnessed the shooting. They immediately called 911, but the killer wiped the cab before walking away. Why do you think the Zodiac Killer chose to kill the cab driver? His MO was typically couples on a dead-end street, not standalone.
So I think there's a couple reasons why he decided to kill the cab driver. One reason is he could have been taking this cab in the first place to actually go and kill another couple that he had been spying on. And the cab driver may have picked up on this and said something, and obviously the Zodiac Killer wouldn't have liked that and decided to take this cab driver out. Another thing he could have also done is he could have chosen to change his MO to throw the police off, because if he kept doing a streak of just blatantly killing couples and stabbing them for the most part, now all of a sudden and if he kept that streak up, the police might be able to figure out who he is, versus if he does something totally out of the ordinary and goes and shoots a cab driver, then is more likely for the police to think it's more of an isolated event, and that's not correlated with the other previous cases.
You're right about that one.
So a description of what basically the teenagers said. They said that they thought that this man was 25 to 30 years old. He was a white male. He was between the height of 5'8" to 5'9". He was stocky. His hair color was a reddish brown like auburn, and he had a crew cut haircut. He also had thick glasses, and he was wearing dark clothing. However, when the dispatcher was mentioning this whole incident to the police, they accidentally described Zodiac Killer as a black male, which is very unfortunate because the result could have been so much different if she described him correctly. Patrol officers Donald Fouquet and Eric Selms did notice that they did see a white male walking east on Jackson Street. They said that this white male looked to be aged 35 to 40 years old. He had light hair and it was in a crew cut with glasses, roughly weighing about 200 pounds. Why do you think that the teenage witnesses and the officers have a little bit of different descriptions of this man?
Well, that's because, police officers and teenagers are obviously different when it comes to giving descriptions. Officers pay a little more attention to detail. They also know, the age of person a little better by just looking at them. Sometimes they're trained to look for certain things that give certain indicators about how old a person is, how much they weigh, et cetera, versus these teenagers just saw this guy and was like, hey, he might be, 25 to 30. He looks kind of younger-ish, but he, in reality, is older. And he's got red-brown hair, which also could be, in different lighting, it could be red-brown, but it also could be light. At first, police believe this was a robbery gone wrong, but around October 13th of 1969, San Francisco Chronicle received a letter. It contained a bloody shirt from the crime scene. SFPD inspectors Dave Toshi and Bill Armstrong assigned and were shook when they found out the shirt belonged to Stine. In the letter, something very, very disturbing was written, and it had said, just shot out the front tire and then pick up the kitties as they come bouncing out, which was an indication that he was starting to kill innocent children. He also claimed he had talked to the patrol officers, which, of course, is accurate. The patrol officers saw this man, but of course they were looking for a black man, so they didn't realize it was him. But a sketch was made, and it was plastered everywhere, and it is the, of course, most famous sketch for the Zodiac Killer that almost everybody knows.
You can just Google it online.
Yeah, it's plastered all over the internet, plastered everywhere. It's the most famous sketch of the Zodiac. Why do you think he was starting to kill innocent children?
So I think one of the main reasons why he was threatening to kill innocent children is because he really wanted to scare the police and scare other people and make sure that whatever he wanted them to do, that they would comply. The only way he felt like the public and the media and the officers would comply is if he made big threats like these. Even if he didn't execute them, it still would scare them shitless. So on 2 p.m. October 29th, 1969, a call was received. The call was received by the Oakland Police Department. Basically, it was from the Zodiac Killer, and he was demanding one of the two lawyers, either F. Lee Bailey or Melvin Belly, to be on the AM San Francisco talk show. And this AM San Francisco talk show is hosted by Jim Dunbar. So Bailey, hearing that, decided, okay, I'm going to appear on the show because I don't want this Zodiac Killer to be killing any more people. So he appears on the show, and then on the show, they get a phone call from someone claiming to be the Zodiac Killer. And this person was just so scared to say their name because they were like, oh, I don't want to be sent to the gas chamber, because the gas chamber at the time was what California would do for really high level suspects who have committed really bad crimes. That's how they would execute people. And so they agreed on calling him a name, Sam. Bailey was like, well, how about we meet in this area where people don't know, I'm not gonna say anything. And the Zodiac Killer did not show up at all to this place. And then later on, they end up confirming that the person who actually called was a mentally ill patient in a hospital. So I just have one question. Why do you think a mentally ill patient decided to call claiming to be the Zodiac Killer?
I think they called claiming to be the Zodiac Killer because they wanted attention. Mentally ill people, of course, I would know because I'm mentally ill. I'm just kidding.
Emotional damage.
Yeah, mentally ill people, unfortunately, sometimes, depending on what kind of mental illness they suffer from, they do things that are irrational without them even noticing it. And they do things sometimes to get attention from people because maybe they didn't have that when they were growing up. That's why they're mentally ill, or they went through some sort of trauma. It's always different for every person, of course, but a lot of the times, though, it is for attention, or it's to, unknowingly them start things.
Start drama.
At this time, the Zodiac Killer was really close to being caught. However, the Zodiac was still smarter than law enforcement. Alive or dead, he still lurks around at this point. So, thank you for listening to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. Remember to always keep your eyes open because you never know when someone's creeping and you never know when you're going to be the taxi driver that gets shot in the back of the head.
Or the next victim of the Zodiac Killer.